Let me also bring on board with great pleasure Mr. Vikram Mehta, Executive Chairman of Brookings India. Mr. Mehta, good afternoon to you and thank you for joining us. Let's talk about the macro and the key assumptions of the budget. Our panel here is divided. Some of them feel the assumptions are stretched.
I have a feel for that, I have to admit. I sort of assessed the budget against 4 or 5 parameters. The first was the vision. Did it actually lay down a credible vision for the economy over the next 3 to 5 years? There I was a little disappointed. The second parameter was the fisc. Does it have a very strong program for consolidation of the fisc? Now I will wait to see the numbers in greater detail before I can be certain that he's really on the pathway towards fiscal consolidation. But I do give him credit for having very specifically identified ways for broadening the tax base and also controlling the expenditure. I mean, the expenditure commission, for example, is one specific measure. Regards jobs, which is a third very important, I think, parameter by which you judge this budget, here again I would be positive. It very clearly spelled out some measures for creating jobs, especially with regard to the medium and small scale industry. And I think one of an important...
So the tax target looks ambitious, but will the government be able to achieve those targets?
Tax target is not ambitious because if you look at the numbers that we are looking at, our estimation is that if the growth is more than 5% or close to 5.6 or 5.7%, then there will be tax buoyancy. And going forward, we are expecting growth to come back with the measures which have been announced by the Finance Minister. The growth should come back into the economy, and with that there will be tax buoyancy. So we think they are realistic numbers.
So one last question as far as the banking space is concerned. What was talked about in terms of the PSU bank and the recapitalization? How big a push do you think that will be for the economy?
That will be a very big push because we need to strengthen the banking system to provide the necessary finance for growth and for investment to go forward. And I think the measures which have been announced today are path-breaking announcements, and you will see going forward that the banking system will have a resurgence.
And sir, a pragmatic point.
Yes, sir, your reflection on the budget, sir.
All right, that was the Finance Secretary Arvind Mayaram in exclusive conversation with ET Now's Gauri Dwivedi. We get to you the budget makers right here on this channel. But Mr. Ravi Uppal is joining us as well from the CIA headquarters. I'm going to speak to you specifically about your sector. Other than a 10-year holiday exemption that has been extended, no big bang as far as infrastructure is concerned, which also includes power.
Well, you know that he has a good cheer for the power sector on 2 grounds. Number one, he said that all the power units which can get commissioned by 31st of March 2015, they would be fully assured about the coal supply. And second, of course, is the extension of the tax holiday up to 31st of March 2017, which I thought was very necessary because a lot of power projects have got stuck because they didn't have fuel, they didn't have the environmental clearances, and they had invested huge amount of money. And this kind of extension of the holiday, tax holiday, will really put their fears to rest and will make the projects viable and feasible as of now. And the other thing that it did was that he also laid out a roadmap for the power sector by saying what are the new kind of technologies they want to bring in. They want us to focus on the ultra supercritical. They want to put a lot of focus on the wind energy plus the solar. The announcement for setting up a ultra solar project. I think then we know the direction which the government wants to move. They do acknowledge that the thermal power sector will continue to be supported and will not be left alone, which seemed to be the case some months ago.
Mr. Ravi Uppal, Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, thank you so much for joining in with that quick perspective live from the CIA headquarters. But we've got another special guest joining in, Mr. Rajiv Lal as well. Mr. Lal, almost all the CEOs who've joined us so far on the panel believe that it's a good budget. They believe it's a practical one given the constraints. But our economists here definitely don't agree. Swaminathan Iyer, Professor Bibek Debra, Maithili Busnurmat, all of them believe it's a disappointing budget and definitely short on detail. What is your view? Would you go with the market view, or do you believe you could have done a lot more given the kind of expectations that there were?
See, this government was elected on the promise of delivering growth. So I think politically it was very important for this budget to be seen as a pro-growth budget. Equally from the economist's perspective and from the market's perspective, it was important for this budget not to appear to be fiscally profligate. To my mind, it meets both these objectives because he has very clearly indicated and laid out a vision, a path, specific policies that are designed to be pro-growth. The accent on rural infrastructure, the accent on the railways, the accent on investment more generally through the REITs, through the infrastructure REITs, the emphasis on infrastructure generally. All of these are designed to underpin a return of the investment cycle. He has equally been, I think, very realistic. He hasn't overpromised anything on the path to fiscal consolidation. If I were to wear my economist hat, the underlying bet that this budget makes is that a return to growth will generate enough buoyancy in tax revenues that we will remain steadfastly on the path towards fiscal consolidation. I think where we are in the macro cycle, where we are in our efforts to revive the growth engine in this country, the budget, to my mind, has done a pretty good job. So I would give them very high marks, actually.
Mr. Lal, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. I am just going to mark the markets for 10 seconds and look at the Nifty. We are what? Less than 100 points away from a record high. On the day of railway budget, we saw a reverse reaction. Markets corrected about 200 points from the day's high. Today, they have recovered more than 200 points from the day's low. And Nilesh, everyone is trying to scratch their head, trying to understand what is there in the budget which is so special. I mean, 200 points up on the Nifty from the day's low. That's an extraordinary feat.
Well, I think this probably looks to be a situation where the markets were perhaps expecting a hike in corporate tax rate. I mean, those kind of rumors were roaming around. And that had built some kind of apprehension that it's quite possible that the marginal tax rate could have been increased by 5 or 10%. Now, that's really not happened, number one. And number two is that there's really no bitter medicine in this budget, which could basically disturb the growth momentum. So to that extent, I think it's more like that the market is feeling relieved that there is no increased burden, there is no increase in tax rates, and that there is significant focus on the core sectors, which are important to basically revive the investment cycle. So I clearly think the market at this stage is focused on these parameters. The other important thing is that while in the last 2 or 3 days crude oil prices were falling, and the market basically was oblivious of that and was choosing to basically ignore that fact. The reality is that crude oil prices have fallen quite a bit in the last 3-4 days, and that's something which has been ignored. So it's quite possible that it's a combination of a budget which is positive, progressive, constructive, and at the same time you have some of the macros which could potentially improve. So I think it's a combination of all of these things and maybe a bit of an oversold situation in the short term which has really created this bounce back in the markets.
Things are coming together and surely the event is out, but budget is also about taxation. Dinesh Kanabar joins us, and Dinesh, lot of important indications and announcements for your sector. Which is the most important one?
If I just begin first to tell you that if I go back and say what are the changes which one had thought would happen prior to the budget, I couldn't have listed as many number of changes that have happened, and I must tell you that most of these changes are very, very positive. I don't think we have understood all of them or digested all of them. In fact, I haven't even seen the fine print. But if I just go by what I heard from the finance minister, so first and foremost, we are talking about the fact that foreign investors will have certainty, the FIIs will have certainty that their income will be capital gains and not business income. A huge positive. Second, look at infrastructure investment. If you have made investment in power, that with the provision which expired, that the power plant had to go on production before 31st March 14 has now been extended to 17. We normally saw a year-on-year increase. We now have a 3-year increase. We have 15% investment allowance, which is actually an incremental thing. And I must just tell you that we almost thought that the era of investment allowance and tax incentives was coming to an end. This government has selectively, or this budget has selectively really promoted investment allowance and tax holidays. Then I look at REITs and the pass-through benefit going to that. Again, a very, very significant move. In fact, it will promote huge amount of investment. And more important, there is huge amount. So there is a disappointment that the retrospective amendment has not been done away with. But look at what else has happened. There's huge amount of litigation, and the provision for authority for advance ruling, whereby one can go and get a ruling in advance, which was up to now available only to non-residents, has been extended to all domestic taxpayers having income above a particular threshold. What the threshold is, we don't know. Now, that's a huge positive. We are also told that the number of benches dealing with authority for advance ruling will expand. Now, if that happens, this could kill huge amount of litigation, because you can now go in advance to the authority, get a ruling, and that ruling will be binding on everybody.